Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today to talk about the grad school application essentials. So my name is Julia Burrows. I am a career and fellowship advisor at the Center for Life Beyond Reed. I advise in the STEM fields, and I actually have a master's and PhD in marine science. So I've been to graduate school twice. So I have knowledge to share with you all about this topic. As far as questions go, feel free to chat, put them in the chat at any time. Alice will be monitoring the chat for me. Also, you can feel free to interrupt me if you're comfortable doing that. And then there will be time for a Q&A at the end as well. So this is an outline of what we're going to be talking about today. We'll start off by discussing why would you want to go to graduate school? We'll then discuss choosing the right grad degree, so talking about master's versus PhD, and how to know what to study, how to find a graduate program. These are some, I think, in my opinion, of the most difficult choices that prospective graduate students have to figure out. Also, reaching out to prospective advisors. We'll talk about the components of most graduate school applications, the application timeline, funding for graduate school, and then I'll end with some tips and tricks, a few tips and tricks that I've picked up over the years, and a resources slide, which I'll find a way to share with you all so you don't have to scribble all that down, and then we'll end with a Q&A. So why go to graduate school? So I'd like to start by asking you all to type in the chat why you might want to go to graduate school or why you think others might want to go to graduate school. So I'll just give you a few minutes to think about that and type it in. Absolutely, career advancement. Research, yep, you're really interested in research and you'd like to continue with that. Any other thoughts? Delaying joining the workforce. Yes, that is a good one. That is definitely a reason some people go to graduate school. All right, well, thank you all for sharing. I actually came up with very similar things that you all came up with. So a grad degree is required for your career goals. So career advancement, exactly as Annie said. So say you want to be a university professor, you will need to get a PhD in almost all cases, right? So that is a reason to go on to graduate school. Another reason, as Addison mentioned, is research. So you really love learning, you love research, and you want to explore a topic in more detail. So some of you may just be super excited by your thesis work and not ready to stop doing that kind of research. So that is a good reason to go on to graduate school so you can continue that work. And then finally, you hope the economy will improve by the time you finish school. So this is what Gavin pointed out here. You want to delay joining the workforce. And this is a reason many people go to grad school. I do hope that there's some of reason 1 or 2 included with this third reason, because grad school can be very, very difficult and challenging. And especially if it's a PhD, it can be a long road. And so you really want to make sure that that is where you want to be for the next 2, 5, 7 years of your life. All right, so which degree is right for you? And there are a whole bunch of specialized degrees that I can't possibly cover in this workshop. So we're just going to talk about general master's degrees and the 2 general types of a course-based or research-based master's degree. And then we'll talk about the PhD, which is almost always research-based. Okay, so some reasons to get a master's is that you're not ready to make a 5+ year commitment to a specific research topic. So you think you like something, but you just want to study for a little bit, right? 5 or more years is a huge commitment. So that's a perfectly good reason to get a master's. Another reason is a master's is a terminal degree in your field. And so that's all you need for your career goals, right? So master's terminal degrees are like an MFA or an MBA, right? So there's no reason to get a PhD in those fields. It doesn't exist. Or another reason to get a master's is you'll start earning a real income sooner, right? So we'll talk later on about funding for graduate school. It's likely that you will get some funding for graduate school, but it's not nearly equivalent of what you would get if you had gone straight into the workforce, right? So you'll start having income and being able to save for retirement a lot sooner with a master's than a PhD program. The reasons for going on to a PhD, one important reason is you have a better chance of obtaining graduate funding. So it's quite difficult to find funding for a master's program, even a research-based master's program, although it does exist. You want to lead your own research group. So if you want to be generating ideas, research ideas, writing grants, and running your own lab, a PhD is the way to go. Another reason to get a PhD is you don't want to be limited by your job options. So you love research, but you're not sure if you want to go into academia or if you want to work for the government, right? Well, if you go into academia, you do need a PhD, right? So maybe that's another reason to go on. But the good news is you can change your mind, right? So it's possible to change from a PhD to a master's program or a master's program to a PhD. Not always. For example, the master's program I went to, the school didn't offer PhDs. So then I did have to reapply and change schools. But in many cases, they do offer master's and PhD programs. So you can move between the two. So how do you know what to study? As I mentioned, I think most undergraduates, including myself, struggled with this a bunch because you're getting a broad education as an undergraduate, whereas a graduate school is very specific. You're studying one tiny specific topic for an extended period of time, right? So how do you find out what you want to study for 5 or 7 years? Well, a couple ideas here to help you. You can talk to your professors and read alum that are in graduate programs, find out what they're studying, find out what they research. You can also attend conferences, go to seminars or other presentations. This is just exposing you to more topics in your field of interest. So if you hear something in a conference that you go to that you're super excited about, you can then do more research on it. You can look into the person who is studying that specific area that you heard. You can read about them. You can see if they're at a college or university that you may be able to work with them in graduate school. Reading journal articles is another great way to find out the breadth of topics available in your area of interest, right? And you don't have to read the whole, you can read the title. If the title sounds interesting, then you can read the abstract, right? And then only if you're super interested in the abstract would you then go on to read the whole paper. So just scanning through journal articles and looking at who wrote those articles, looking them up online and finding out where they are and what type of work they're doing. So that's a good way to help you find a potential graduate advisor. Also, shadowing and talking to professionals is a really great way. So this is, again, just we can put you in touch with tons of, Reed has a bunch of awesome alumni that we can put you in touch with that you can find out more information about your careers you're interested in. And most importantly, I think it's is to find something that excites you. So graduate school can be a long and arduous path. So if you're not excited about something when you start, it's very likely that you won't be excited about it when you finish, right? So yeah, really try to find something that you're really excited about. I also want to mention here that some of you may not be ready to go straight to graduate school from undergrad, from Reed. I know I wasn't. I ended up taking 4 years off. And in that time, I got experience in different fields. And that helped me narrow down what I wanted to study for my graduate work. And so that is very, very common to work for a few years after you finish undergrad before you apply to graduate school. And that is viewed positively by all graduate schools, as long as you're doing work and you can make an argument for how that helped inform your decision for your next steps for graduate school. So a few tips for finding a graduate program I'd like to share. Think about how you learn best and what you want from a program. So do you like autonomy? Do you want less classroom-based learning? Do you want more collaborations? Consider how important location is for you, right? is if it's really important to you that you are near your family, then you are probably going to be very limited in where you can go. So think about location, consider costs and work options while you're in school, especially if the program is not funded. And then I encourage you to explore the details of the program. So the contact hours you'll have with the teaching staff, the cohort size, the curriculum, the program duration, the graduation rate. These are all things that you can find out online. That's definitely worth looking into. So for PhDs and research-based master's degrees, you want to reach out to prospective graduate advisors actually before you submit your graduate application. In the process of reaching out to these graduate advisors, you want to thoroughly explore their website. So look at their current research, look at their graduate students, who they have as graduate students, what they're doing. Look at what grants they've gotten recently and what they've been publishing on recently. So you really want to become familiar with their work before you reach out. You also want to look for any information for prospective students and what to include. So does it say a note for prospective students? If you're reaching out to me, make sure to include a CV and a personal statement and a writing sample. Okay, so if you don't want to reach out to them without including exactly what they're asking for on their website. And then something else I've also found out is that don't assume the website is up to date. So I've seen some websites that say, I will not be taking graduate students next fall. What is next fall? Well, it turns out next fall was this fall and it hadn't been updated for the following year. So if it says that, I would not feel bad asking for a clarification. I saw this on your website. Did you mean fall 2021? And they'll probably change that pretty quickly. So when you are reaching out by email to your potential graduate advisor, there's a few things that it's important to include. So you want to include your major, your school, and the year you plan to graduate. If you're an alumni, include what you're doing now, what you've been doing since graduation. You want to mention what graduate degree you're hoping to attain and the year you plan to start. So I'm interested in the PhD starting in fall 2021. And then you want to talk about your research interests and you want to be as specific as possible when you do this, and you want to show that you know their research interests. You've read through their website in a lot of detail, and you want to demonstrate that there's a good research fit between what you're interested in and what they're currently doing. And then you want to get to your ask. So if it doesn't say on their website, if they're taking new grad students for fall 2021, for example, you say, are you taking new grad students for fall 2021? And if so, would you have time to talk? And we want to be really specific about that request for time to talk. So you want to say, would you have 15 to 30 minutes to talk on the phone or Zoom in the next few weeks about your research lab? Okay. So I have an example email here that I would like to share with you. So instead of reading this, I'm just going to give you all a second to read through that, and then feel free to write in the chat or let me know if you have any questions about that. Now, obviously, this is a science-focused, a chemistry person with an interest in chemistry, but this could be modified for, a social scientist or humanities. The point is you're being very specific about your research interest, and you're letting them know you know exactly what they do and that you think it would be a good fit. All right. So I'd like to take about 5 minutes to put you all in small groups of about 3 or 4. And I'd like you to practice talking about your research interests. And if you don't have, if you're still early on in your program, I don't expect you to have a really specific developed research interest, but that's okay. So first I'd like you to think about what are you interested in, jot down a few notes, okay? And then share your research interests with each other. So this is a great skill to practice making eye contact, speaking with confidence, and talking about what you're interested in. And then I'd like you to start a draft email to this potential imaginary grad advisor. So you can include your major, your school year, the grad degree you're interested in, the year you're hoping to start. You can just make something up if you're not sure, and your research interests, and then what specifically you're asking for. And then save this draft, because then when you are ready to reach out to your prospective advisors, you just need to go back and fill in their name and their research interests and show that there's that match, right? So you'll have a lot of this email already drafted. So just to give you an example of how specific a research interest you eventually want to get to when you are applying, I'll give you an example of my interest. So I mentioned that I studied marine biology. If I wanted to get a little bit more specific, I might say, oh, I'm interested in marine ecology. If I wanted to get more specific, marine animal behavior. But if I wanted to be very specific, I would say I'm interested in marine ecology and animal behavior, specifically predator-prey interactions and how environmental variability affects marine top predator abundance and distribution. Okay, so just to give you an idea of eventually the point of what you want to be able to talk about with much specificity. So now we're going to switch gears and talk a little bit about the main components of your grad school application. So I have them listed here. There is almost always an application fee, unfortunately, and this can range from $50 to $100 or more per school. So if you're applying for a lot of schools, it can get quite expensive. You may be asked to submit scores for your general GRE tests, which costs $205, and a subject test, which costs around $150. More and more schools are going away from requiring GRE scores because they're realizing that standardized tests are not the best predictor of how students will do in graduate school. So make sure to check the requirements of the school you're applying to. You'll also be asked for transcripts. These are typically official transcripts that you will need to request. They be sent from Reed to the school to which you're applying. You'll also be asked for a CV or resume, depending on the program, right? So a CV is an academic resume without a length limit, and it can be a lot more detailed and specific than a resume. You'll be asked for a statement of purpose or personal statement or some form of essay, at least one essay, and then letters of recommendation. So the last three bullets here, the CV, the personal statement, and the letters of recommendation, have the most impact, and these are the most important. So I've highlighted the last two because I'm going to spend a little more time going into detail on those two. So for your personal statement, the way I see it should have these four different, make sure you incorporate these four different different components, particularly if there's only one essay. So you want to talk about your background, specifically as related to your professional accomplishments and the development of your research interests. So you want to talk about why you're prepared for graduate school. What research have you done in the past that prepares you? How have you faced adversity, either personally or related to your research? If it is personal, you do want to make sure there's some connection there. You want to talk about your future areas of study. So what type of research do you hope to do in graduate school, and why are you qualified to do it? You want to talk about the program and advisor fit. So why the program and advisor are a good fit for you. So this, just like we talked about before, you want to show you've done your homework, that you've spent a long time on that program and advisor's website, so you're very familiar with the type of work that they do. You want to also, it's great if you can talk about something specific to the program that indicates to that program why you're choosing them over another school. And then you want to talk about your career goals. So what are your ultimate career goals, and how will this degree help you towards that goal? So it's important throughout your application, you have one coherent story with your personal statement, your CV, your letters of recommendation. Important skills that almost every graduate school is looking for is that you want to demonstrate that you're hardworking, that you're self-motivated, that you're dedicated, that you have relevant research skills, that you're collaborative, and that you have good time management. So in general, if a program asks for both a personal statement and a statement of purpose, just want to clarify this a little bit because sometimes they're used interchangeably, but if they do ask for both of those, the personal statement is your background and the development of your research interests. And the statement of purpose is more of a research proposal or description of what you plan to focus on in the program and your future career goals. Now let's talk a little bit about letters of recommendation. So most graduate schools will ask for 3 letters of recommendation. So I think it's a good idea to try to aim for 4 because you have no idea what's going to happen down the road. So if you are just getting started with your graduate school journey, like say you're a sophomore in undergrad, start thinking about who can I ask for my letters of recommendation? Who do you hit it off with? What faculty do you feel like you have a really good relationship with and that you can further develop that relationship as you move through your time at Reed? So this is something that is always good to have in the back of your mind. Would this person be able to write me a letter? How can I get to know this person better so they can write me a stronger letter? Okay. You want to choose letter writers who know you in different capacities. So if you're applying for a research program, you most definitely want to have someone that has advised and seen you work in a research capacity, right? But if you have someone that also taught a class, they've seen you as a student and they've seen you as a researcher, they're able to speak more comprehensively to your work. So if you are applying for a course-based program, definitely you want to have people who can attest to your abilities to perform well in a course. And then maybe one letter from someone who is a research advisor. Okay, so just think about who you're asking and what they can say about you. Don't wait until you need the letter to ask for it. So as I mentioned, you want to start developing relationships and stay in touch with faculty now. Even if you're thinking about going to grad school a few years down the road, let them know now that you're thinking about going to grad school and you're going to take some time off. And that you are hoping that they might write you a strong or supportive letter. So when you do ask, it's important to put these adjectives in front of the word letter because anyone can write a letter, but if the letter is not going to help your chances of getting into school, then you don't want that letter. Okay, so I encourage students to ask for a strong or supportive letter. When you do make your official ask when you're actually applying, so if you're applying this fall, then you probably have already made your official ask or you are going to very soon. You want to give at minimum 2 weeks notice, but ideally over a month's notice, okay? And you want to provide them with exact information on how they submit the letter. Do they go to a specific website? Do they email it to this address? And then when the due dates are for each of the schools to which you're applying. One little kind of hint that I have picked up throughout the years is that you might want to give a deadline like weeks ahead, a week ahead or so of when you really need it in case they miss it. So faculty are really busy and sometimes they will forget. So you want to send reminders. It's perfectly okay to send reminders a couple weeks out, 1 week out, check if it's submitted. If it's still not submitted, you can send it a few days out, right? So sending multiple reminders is absolutely okay. But if you would like the letter submitted early, you can say, would you be able to submit a letter by this date? Okay. Sometimes a faculty will ask you for specific material to help them write the letter. If they don't ask, you can always offer it. So when I write letters of recommendation, I usually ask for a CV, a draft of the personal statement because I don't expect it to be complete at that point. And then a lot of times I'll ask some students for some bullets or ideas of what they would like me to say about them. Faculty forget details, especially if it's been a while since they worked with you. So reminding them these specific details, something you found challenging in their class and what you did to overcome it, that helps them write their letter. It gives them some content to include in that letter.
Julia, we have a question
Oh,
about
great.
how should we contextualize Read in our personal statement. But I think it's really nice to bring it up right now because you're also going to ask faculty to help you contextualize read in their letters of recommendation by talking a little bit about the grading policy. But any advice on how to contextualize read in the personal statement or
Yeah, so
ask the letter?
I mean, I think if you want to talk about some of the reasons, if this comes naturally into your story, if you want to talk about some of the reasons you came to read, you know, the de-emphasis on grades, the academic rigor, I think that fits in, that could potentially fit in very nicely. A lot of students that read struggle with their GPA because of the lack of grade inflation. So if that's specific, what you mean here, Gavin, I have a tip for that is that you ask one of your letter writers to address Reed's grading policy. They'll be the form submitted along with the transcript that we've all seen that has some statistical data, but that doesn't always get passed on.
Mm-hmm.
But the letters do get passed on. So I would encourage you to ask at least one of your recommenders to talk about the academic rigor of Reed. Um, so if that didn't answer your question, feel free to jump in and ask a follow up.
I think mostly what I was talking about was the grading, but also just the difference of applying from a liberal arts background to like I'm interested in sort of like engineering PhD type things, and they often expect people to have a lot of technical education that we won't necessarily have.
Great question. That is something that um, a lot of students struggle with at Reed, and so we can talk. Let's talk more about that offline, Gavin. We should have a chat on how, especially if you're applying right now, on how to address that. Thank you for asking about that.
Thank you.
Okay, so one more activity I'd like you guys to do, and this is we'll do another 5 minutes of small groups of 3 to 4. We'll discuss with your peers who you might ask to write you letters. And if you're early on, obviously you're not going to have all 3 yet. That's fine. Just want to get you thinking about it, right? In what capacity you know the letter writer, um, and what do you hope that they'll say about you? What can they talk about? Like they'll speak to your research, your research ability, if they were your research advisor, right? And then decide how and when you will ask them. And then if you have time, begin for those that you need to email. So you may want to ask some Reed professors in person, if you can do that and COVID is no longer around. But if not, there's some people that are maybe not at Reed that you'll have to email that request. So you can start to think about how would you draft an email to make that request. All right, welcome back, everyone. Hopefully that was helpful. So now I'd like to talk about the timeline for applying to graduate school. Now, keep in mind, this is an ideal timeline. So although I recommend some things happen in summer, sometimes they do happen, get pushed to fall, and that is okay. People have done all this in fall and still gotten in. So ideally, I recommend in the summer, you start to, if you haven't already, research and reach out to potential graduate school advisors. You study for and take the GRE if it's required. So you should look into if it's required, optional, or not even a place to submit a score. You want to polish your CV and resume during this time and begin your personal statement. And the reason why I recommend doing all this in the summer is it's particularly if you are applying when you're a senior and you're going straight through, this is a lot to do on top of applying to graduate school, on top of your senior thesis, on top of a full class load with Reed's academic rigor, right? So the more that you can get done early, the easier it is for you come fall time. So in fall is a good time to finalize the list of grad schools. And generally, I'm often asked how many students should apply to. 5 to 10 is a good number, depending on the program. I recently learned that in clinical psychology, you want to apply to more than that, maybe like 10 to 15. But for most disciplines, 5 to 10 is good. You want to finalize your personal statement at this time. So make sure you get lots of feedback. So I'm happy advisors at CLBR are happy to give you feedback. Ask your faculty to give you feedback. And so as you all know, writing takes multiple drafts. So that's why I recommend starting the personal statement early so you have time to make it read very smoothly. Then this is the time to make your official requests for letters of rec. So remember, you've already developed the relationship with faculty. You've already asked them if they'd be willing when the time comes to write you a supportive letter. So now you're going to make that official request with what schools you're applying to, when those letters are due, and how they submit them. And then you're also going to work on your online application, which will be, you'll have one for each school. So it can be quite time consuming to enter all your information, most 5 to 10 times. And usually those applications are due December 1st. There is some variability. Sometimes they're due a little earlier than that. Sometimes they're not due until January. And then in spring is when you'll start to hear back from these schools. So maybe in February or March, you'll hear back. You may be invited to interview on campus in non-COVID times. This would be potentially a Zoom interview. I want to remind you that you are interviewing them as well as much as they are interviewing you, because it's important that you find the right fit for you. And then you'll have until April 15th to let schools know of your final decision of where you plan to go. One other tip regarding the interview process is you don't have to wait till you get an interview to go to the school and visit and meet with your advisor. So I actually just, when I was applying to PhD programs, I actually just asked my potential advisor at the time, if he would happen to be around in January. I was thinking about making a trip there to check out the school in the town, and I would like to meet with him while I was there. So I kind of created my own interview before the official interviews. The disadvantages, you're paying for it yourself. Some schools will pay for you to come, others will not. But the advantage is you're meeting with them before they're making decisions of who goes to the next interview round, right? So just something to think about there.
Julia, we have a question from Tyler. What's the appropriate way to ask for letters from faculty right now if I can't see them in person? Is an email sufficient? Should I try to set up some sort of mysterious meeting and then ask them there?
Tyler, that's a great question. Thanks for asking. So if you're applying, I'm assuming, and feel free to unmute if you're comfortable, I'm assuming you're applying this fall. If you are applying this fall, you can't see them, as you're saying, an email is absolutely acceptable, unless you're going to meet them for some other reason. Like say they're your thesis advisor and you meet with them regularly, so you were going to have a meeting with them. I think it is nice to talk about it in person at that point, right? But if it's someone that you're not seeing regularly, an email is absolutely okay. And I'm happy to review, and any of the advisors at CLBR would be happy to review those draft emails if you'd like. All right. So let's talk a little bit about funding. I think I mentioned before that most PhD degrees and some research masters should be funded. And so what I mean by funded is that you get a tuition waiver, so you don't have to pay tuition, plus you get a stipend for working part-time. And this stipend should be enough if you live frugally to break even, essentially. So for your part-time work, this can be in the form of a teaching, research, or graduate assistantship. And these are offered through the graduate school or your advisor. So just to talk a little bit about what each of these are, a teaching assistantship is you are basically paid to help out a professor, teach a class. If it's in the sciences, usually you're teaching a lab on your own. If it's in math, it could be a recitation section. And there's so many of these that are awarded to students every year. There's not enough to fund every student this way. So then there's also research assistantships. Research assistantships generally are funded by the advisor rather than the school. So the advisor gets a research grant, they write into their grant funding a stipend and tuition waiver for a graduate student. And then you work on this advisor's research, which may or may not be in your area of research, the research that you're doing for your master's or dissertation. And then finally, there's graduate assistantships, and these are typically just jobs at a university. in administration, clerical work, IT support, admissions and records, and program coordination. There's another way to pay for graduate school, and this is to apply for your independent fellowship. And this is the best way to fund yourself because basically you're paid to do your research. So in those other things I talked about, you're paid to do work, and that then you have to do your research in addition to that. So for fellowships, you're paid to go to school, be a student, do your research, and it comes with a tuition waiver. So I've listed a few databases here, which are great to search for graduate school fellowships in your area of interest. And we have, if you need some help with this, come see an advisor. We're happy to help you. I do want to mention that course-based master's programs are usually not funded. So they are usually the same that you're used to right now, where you apply for financial aid, you take out loans, and fund yourself.
Julia, we have another question from Tyler.
Okay.
Is it possible to defer graduate school acceptance? It's difficult to make predictions of what I'd like to be doing a year from now, you know, with 2020 and all that.
Totally. It is possible, Tyler. It absolutely depends on the school and the source of funding. So I do know people that have deferred, and I do also know of situations in that the funding won't still be there for them the next year, so it's not possible. So just a few more tips here before we get to the resources page. One thing that is so super helpful is to reach out to graduate students currently working with your potential advisor who are currently enrolled in your program of interest. And by reaching out, I mean sending an email and asking them, say, hey, you're thinking about going to school, to working with the same advisor. Would they have 15 minutes or so to talk on the phone with you about their experiences working with that advisor? Because the reason to ask for a phone call is because if they have anything negative to say, which you really want to know because that's important, they're probably not going to put it in writing. They're probably not going to put it in an email. Okay. So definitely ask them if they have time to chat. And I have found out such helpful information from talking to graduate students. And a graduate advisor can really make or break your whole experience, your whole program. Like they single-handedly have the most impact over your success in graduate school. So you want to choose your graduate advisor very wisely and get as much information as you can in making that decision. I also want to remind you that you're evaluating your advisor just as much as they're evaluating you. So it's easy to feel flattered that someone is interested in you and just accept without doing much research. But I'm encouraging you to look into this potential advisor as much as you can. Also, it's ideally you want to find more than one advisor that you could work with at an institution. And this is because things happen, right? Sometimes advisors change schools. And if advisor change schools, you either have to find another advisor or you have to change schools with them. You might be settled, you may not be ready to move, right? Other time, on rare, unfortunate occasions, someone actually dies, right? And if your advisor dies, what are you going to do? Hopefully there's someone else at that program that you can work with. Okay, so that's kind of something else to think about. Oh, and Alice wrote, thought maybe we had a chat, but got, okay. All right, so I just want to share some resources with you. The first one I have here is we've got a very extensive information on graduate school on our website, the CLBR website. So please check that out. Another source of information is specialty guides. So for example, the APA graduate study in psychology. So different fields put out specialty guides for their discipline. So you can look into those. There's also many graduate and professional school fairs. So definitely, if you get the opportunity, check those out. Check out multiple schools. There's search engines, GradTrek, Peterson's, gradschool.com. You can use those resources. Petersons.com has every accredited program in the US. And then there's those rankings, which you should definitely take with a grain of salt. We all know how Reed feels about rankings, but they are available, and there's a couple sites to use if you are interested in looking at rankings. And then finally, I wanted to just share with you how to contact CLBR, how to contact me. This is our homepage here. If you'd like to talk about any of this in more detail with one of the advisors, you can click right here, make an appointment, and it'll link you through to Handshake, and you'll be able to schedule your own time that works for you. We have a general email for CLBR, which is beyondread@read.edu, and then this is my email here.